sooner you act, the better.
The World Cocoa Foundation has created cocoa block supply of cocoa. Cut down all other types of. There already was a wedge, but that.
Now you started a project, you started in the middle of the dinner prep area, so that ain't gonna fly. Speaking of projects.
Good evening, everyone. I am Katie Willett. I'm your IB coordinator, and welcome to our diploma program information evening. So we're very excited to welcome you, and just want to give a special thanks to our Myers Park PTSO and our Myers Park IB PAC for making this possible and for you to come and join me tonight. And so from wherever you are, please know this presentation slides are already on our website, myersparkib.org. So feel free to check that out, or if you want to follow along, sometimes I like to follow along with the slides that way, but they'll also be there for your perusal later because there's a lot of information coming and you might need to reach out to me and ask some more questions, and that's more than acceptable. So we'll go to the next slide. So for those of you who haven't met me, that is what I look like on a good day, I suppose. And so I am, again, the middle years program, the MYP, and our diploma program coordinator. My contact information is there. Email is probably the best way that you can get in touch with me. So it's all there for you, making sure you can kind of come back to it. Next slide. So this is just a reminder about diploma program at the park. So our diploma program students are fully Myers Park students, so they can participate in any extracurricular activity that they want to, or sports, depending on the requirements for that. So they are fully Myers Park students, and they are also diploma students, which is exciting for them. Our 11th grade students, they are in year 1 of the diploma program. And so the IB has a special name for them, and we refer to them as anticipated candidates because we anticipate that they will get the IB diploma and that they're going to work towards that IB diploma. They are the class of 2023. And the majority of their assessment requirements will take place, especially their external assessments, will take place in May of 2023. So again, lots of special acronyms, things that we throw out, but they are my anticipated candidates in year 1. My 12th graders are in year 2 of the diploma program, as it is a 2-year program. And so they are now officially diploma candidates. They are the class of 2022. And so they will be doing the majority of all of their assessment pieces this year. And so they are May 2022 diploma candidates. And of course, our students that are in the IB have access to IB Student Council. And so that is one thing that sets them apart a little bit, that they get to access IB Student Council. Go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So we're going to briefly dive into program requirements and student expectations before we get into what assessment looks like in the diploma program and specifically what that means for this year. So next slide. So the diploma program is a 2-year program. Again, that year 1, 11th grade, year 2, 12th grade, and we follow the IB curriculum model. Students at Myers Park that are in the IB program are working towards an IB diploma, but they also may earn IB certificates. And these certificates come for the courses that they take, and they reveal the score that they received on their IB courses. There is potential college credit that students can earn per class. So even if they fall short of that IB diploma, they can receive college credit for those classes. And that depends on the institution where they're going. However, I am proud to say that with advanced coursework in the UNC system, that the UNC system has standardized that all 16 colleges and universities in the UNC system accept our IB credit, which is exciting. Next slide, please. Students are working towards 2 diplomas. And so this is perhaps my favorite slide. That's really cheesy, but I love it. And it is really just a tale of 2 diplomas. And so students are, of course, working towards their North Carolina, their Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and their Myers Park High School diploma. But then, of course, they're also working towards that International Baccalaureate. So when I refer to a diploma, I am not referring to any graduation requirements set by the state of North Carolina. I'm referring to requirements set by the IBO. And so just making sure that we have those 2 separate in our minds, because students, who don't necessarily receive the IB diploma, even though they've worked really hard for it, may fall short of it. They still do receive as long as they meet all their graduation requirements for the state of North Carolina. And so just want to make sure that that is quite clear as we go through that. If you go to the next slide, please. Understanding how we get the IB diploma is really essential for a student in the diploma program. And so I've created this graphic organizer, which if you have an 11th grader, a year 1 student, we did a deep dive into this. And so they should actually be able to explain this graphic to you. I've gone in twice, we've looked through it, we've done an inquiry through it, making sure that they can explain it to you. And so there is on the live links, you can click there and it will take you linked to our website where that is there. But there are 2 sections for our IB diploma. And the first section is the subject areas. So IB requires that students take 6 courses in 6 subject areas. Group 1 is English, Group 2 are world languages, Group 3 are individuals and societies, our Group 4 is sciences, and Group 5 is maths. And then Group 6 is arts and electives. And arts and electives can be anything from groups 2 through 5. And so I work closely with students as they're picking out their courses to make sure that they know where those are. The IB core requirements our theory of knowledge, which is a class for year 1 and 2, the extended essay, and then creativity, activity, and service. And so we'll dive a little bit more into that and what that means, but I want you to be able to see this graphic because hopefully by the end, you also will be able to explain this as we go forward. Next slide, please. The IB asks that we tell you at the beginning of any presentation, so anytime I do a presentation with students or I do a presentation for you, that we review what the mission of the IB program really is. And so that is the aim of all IB programs, is to develop internationally minded people who recognize their common humanity and shared guardianship of the planet, help to create a better and more peaceful world. Next slide, please. Another thing that I'm required by the IBO to inform you of are the Myers-Park IB policies. And so you'll see I have linked their assessment policies, academic honesty policy, admissions policy, language policy, and our inclusive education policy. Those are all linked on our IB website. So we draft those as a school and have informed parent information from you. So if you ever see anything in those policies that you would like to discuss or would like to revise, please reach out to me. And that is absolutely something that we can do and take a look at that. We are currently in the process of revising our assessment policy. That was something that IBO has asked us to revisit. And so we're revisiting that one just so that you are aware of that. Our admissions policy deals with that you have to be a student of Myers-Park High School, but that especially at the MYP level, we are an open enrollment program. At the diploma level, we are also open enrollment as long as you've met those curriculum guidelines of the level 3 of math and level 3 of world language to enter. If you go to the next slide, please. So as we take a look at our curriculum model, that on the left, that graphic there, you can follow along. It's our curriculum model, what we have to teach students, we have to teach teachers, we have to go through and making sure that we hit that. And so you'll notice what I actually love about the IB curriculum is that we try to keep learners at the center. And so the IB has identified that as the learner profile. And those are all of the characteristics that we hope that students develop over their time in the IB programs, whether it's MYP and DP or just MYP or just DP. Go ahead to the next slide, please. You may often see this graphic. This is something that IB publishes. But these are the idea that IB's list of desired attributes for lifelong learning and success in future years. If you go to the next slide, please. The next piece of our IB curriculum model is the approaches to teaching and approaches to learning. And so specifically for students, we talk a lot about approaches to learning. And the way to think of this is, how do we teach our students to learn how to learn? Because we're going to be in a lot of different situations, especially as we move into the 21st century. How do we continue learning? And what does that look like when I'm in a job or a career or at university? And so the IB has identified these approaches to learning as communication, social, self-management, research, and thinking. And these are hopefully lifelong skills that are developed over the 4 years, the MYP and the DP. And those skill clusters that you see there on the right-hand side is something that teachers work with, both implicitly and explicitly in their lessons, infusing those there. So for example, anytime we suggest a student to write down a date, that is when we are encouraging self-management so that students keep planners, which is my #1 tool for success in the diploma program, is making sure that students know how to keep track of what assignments are due and when. If you go to the next slide, please. So the next piece of our curriculum model is what IB refers to as the core. And so these are things that students must be able to do. And there's only really one that is supposed to take place as a class, and that is our theory of knowledge class. So that is a class on our campus. Students in year 1 take TOK1, in year 2, they take TOK2. And this is a mandatory IB requirement that allows students to reflect on the nature of knowledge and how we know what we claim to know. It's really diving into what is the nature of learning and what do we do with that. We support students by providing some of the time, because we have extra time in there at times, with the extended essay support and creativity, activity, and service support, and that is that CAS. Both of these, the extended essay and the IBO, or excuse me, the CAS, are IB requirements. And so we want to make sure that we support students with that, but those two are actually expected by the IB to be done outside of class time. We do carve a little bit of time to make sure that we support students through that. The extended essay is a mandatory requirement that is an independent, self-directed piece of research, and finishing and culminating with a 4,000-word research paper. Our seniors are close to working on that. They've just submitted a detailed outline, and we'll continue working in that in the future. Creativity, activity, and service we'll dive into in just a little bit, so I'm not going to go too much into that at the moment. If you go to the next slide. In fact, here we are. I've created a one-page description of what CAS is, the general expectations, what the CAS portfolio is, and organizing evidence and reflections, and basically our overall approach. And so students tend to really get stressed about CAS, I find. And when I sit down and talk with students, they're actually doing quite a bit outside of school. The point of CAS is for students to develop and take what they're learning in school and apply it to their personal lives at school. And really, it's just about developing themselves. So if they play any sport, whether it's for Myers Park or it's something on their own, they might do yoga or practice yoga or take walks. Whatever they're doing, those are things that count because they're investing in themselves. And so that's a really good way to think of CAS, is that they're just investing in themselves. And we want students to be able to do that. We also want them to get out into the community, interact with others, and that is that service piece. And then of course, creativity, want to encourage students to potentially continue learning a language that they might not be studying formally in school, or working with a religious organization that they tend to work with. There are some caveats to CAS, and the one caveat to CAS is that they cannot be paid for that. So if they receive money for it, so if they babysat and received money for it, they can't count that. Or if they were a camp counselor and received money for that, they can't count that as well. But if they worked at a camp and were volunteering and didn't receive any money for that, then they could absolutely count that. So we work with students for there. If you go to the next slide, please. What the IB is asking that students do over CAS is that they meet these 7 learning outcomes. They just have to meet the learning outcomes once, and students find very quickly that some activities that they do meet more than one of these outcomes. And so we want students to be able to identify their own strengths all the way down to recognizing and considering the ethics of voices and actions. And so as students work through that, they apply their learning to these things they're doing outside the classroom. And that is the beauty of CAS. It's investing in student selves. If you go to the next slide, please. We received feedback from students last year because one of the other parts of CAS is that it has to take place as a habit of service. It has to take place over the 18 months in the program. And so what we do find with students is, as we all, it's human nature, we realize that we've put that on the back burner and we need to catch up with that really quickly. And in the last 2 years, it's been really difficult, right? And during pandemic times, it's just been really difficult. And so we had some students reach out to us and ask us for a list and to guide them and to make sure that they were kind of on track and to help them set deadlines. And so we've done that. And so we've created actually posters as well, so students know that this exists. There is a 12th grade deadlines poster. It's just there to help students. It means that if a student doesn't think they're going to reach the deadline by the time they think they are going to, they need to reach out to me. And so that way we can talk. I am the CAS advisor for students. Just talk, we have a deadline coming up in November. It may be something where, whoa, that time really got away from me. Can I meet it in December? And the answer is going to be, of course, yes, as long as we are meeting those requirements of the 18 months. If you go to the next slide, please. In fact, the next deadline is November 30th, where we want students to have recorded at least one CAS experience. Again, that could be anything from being creative, perhaps they're exploring painting on their own, or continuing to learn how to play the violin or perfecting how to play the violin. These are all things that they can count there. So just keeping that in mind for us. We've done the same, if you go to the next slide, please. We've done the same for our 11th graders as well, except this is a little bit more overwhelming in that it includes both years of the program. So students are able to see where they should have started all the way in September, and they will see where they will finish all the way in May of 2023. And so that is there. They have access to that. They can print it off. We have it printed around the school, making sure that students can easily access that. We've also written a CAS handbook. You'll see that has been linked in several places on our slides. You can easily access that. There's lots of how-tos. So if a student happens to be doing this really late at night and they know that Miss Willett is not going to be answering her emails at 11 o'clock at night, they can easily go on and check that out. And so that is there for students to support them. We go to the next slide, please. So again, we've done a checklist for our 11th grade students. Their dates are going to be very parallel to year 2 to our 12th graders. So again, we also have a November 30th deadline coming up where we want students to record at least one CAS experience. I also have these in Manageback for students as well. So this sends them reminders that is coming up. And so we'll talk about Manageback a little bit later in the presentation, but this is why it's really imperative that students are really checked into Manageback, because that is where I can communicate with students really easily. In fact, that's a lot easier than email sometimes, just communicating with students. If you go to the next slide, please. So now we're getting into the subject areas, and we went over this briefly when we looked at the graphic to explain the IB diploma. And so these are the required classes, the 6 subject groups that I've already mentioned, and students have to choose 3 at the higher level and 3 at the standard level. And that is what we recommend. The higher level tends to go a little bit more in depth in terms of skill and content in the subjects. Standard level is still advanced coursework, but doesn't go quite as in depth, doesn't have quite as many requirements for students to do. Some students, just based on the nature of what they're interested in and based on the nature of their classes, they can take 4 higher level classes and 2 standard level. And this is done, most of our courses are done over 2 years, although we do have some 1-year assessments. And so that is where our anticipated candidates may be testing in some of their courses this year. The IB prides itself on having continuous assessment. So it is not just a 1-day snapshot on how a student is doing on a particular day, but rather they take the temperature, if you will, of a student throughout the course. So at the very beginning and then at the very end. They do this through the internal assessment, and we'll talk a little bit more when we get to the assessment piece about what internal assessments are and why they're really important. And then our external exams, which is an easy way to think of the end of course exams that happen at the end of the year. If you go to the next slide, please. So sometimes students, have trouble articulating what those courses are. And so we've created a hyperlinked graphic for you. And this explains all the courses that we offer. And if you notice under the HL or the SL, there's a little line under that. That is because that is hyperlinked. You can go and easily take a look at all of these requirements. It's right there. Sometimes it's just easier to look at that, the IBO subject briefing guides. And so that way you can take a look at that. So if all of a sudden none of this makes sense and you want to go back and look at what's required for each course, this is a good graphic to go and take a look at. If you would please go to the next slide. So now we're going to dive into assessment and our May 2022 external examinations and our papers. So IB is a little bit European in terms of how they refer to it. So you're going to hear the word paper 1. That is in our American vernacular, what we'd refer to as examination 1 or exam 1 and how they do that. Next slide. So assessment in the diploma program. So IB's assessment procedures measure the extent to which students have mastered advanced academic skills and fulfilling these goals. So for example, they're going to have students analyzing and presenting information, evaluating and constructing arguments, and solving problems creatively. This all goes back to that mission that they ask us to share with you. If you go to the next slide, please. And so these basic skills are also addressed. For example, retaining specific content knowledge is going to be addressed, and understanding key concepts that are present in each subject area, as well as applying standard methods. And this is really important to understand that student results are not determined by performance set against set standards. Excuse me, they are done by set standards, not by the student's position in the overall rank. If you go to the next slide, please. So the IB formulates a score, which we tend to refer, IB will call a grade, we tend to call it a score, through both the understanding and the submission of internal assessments and external examinations, those papers. So internal assessments are IBO's subject-specific tasks. So the IB tells us what these tasks have to look like, and they vary from subject to subject. And they are designed for student work to be guided and marked, our word would be graded, by teachers. So teachers have a limited amount of feedback that they can give based on these internal assessments. And so the IB articulates exactly what that feedback can look like and when and how that can happen. They also tend to be externally moderated by the IBO. So that in years past means that we send off scores of all of our students that we have marked or graded. And then the IB will ask us to send 10 or 15 actual papers to them. They then check to make sure that we are accurate. This is all about IB making sure there's quality assurance and that we are all in line with an international audience. And then they would send us back and they would moderate us. So for example, if we decided that a student should have received the level 6 on their IA, and they also agreed that we got a 6, that means that we were spot on. But if they thought that we graded too hard on students, then they would necessarily tell us that we need to go ahead and give points back to students. So it's all very well done. Again, this quality assurance, this is why teachers go to trainings. This is why they need to continuously do trainings for IB, to making sure that we're all in line with the international community. However, I put an asterisk there next to that because that has been in years past. For the past 2 years during the pandemic, in May of 2020 and May of 2021, the IB required that all internal assessments be submitted to them for marking. So we were not moderated they specifically marked them externally, meaning someone at the IBO, they hired examiners and they looked at all of our papers. That is because for the past 2 years, Myers Park High School, we've been on what the IB refers to as the non-examination route. So last year, our students did not sit for external examinations. They sat for their IAs. So when I talk to students, I tell them the importance of their internal assessments. This is the only thing that they can control. They get feedback on it. They can perfect it until the teacher tells them they can't. Again, remember, there are specific times when we have to turn these in. The teacher is going to be the person that's going to guide them through that the best. But it's going to be incredibly important that students make sure they're doing the best that they possibly can on this, because our students' scores last year were based almost entirely upon their internal assessments. Our students did very well, but it was only based on their internal assessments. And so that's really, really important for students. If you can tell, I'm really passionate about that. The internal assessments tends to relate to our process skills in that subject area. That tends to be what the internal assessments require. The external examinations, these are exams, papers, they are taken under controlled conditions. So I will need to have invigilators. We will have to be walking around, making sure that students aren't cheating, etc., with students' responses marked or graded externally. So again, the IBO hires people, we send the examinations off. There are varied formats. I will tell you that multiple choice is very rare. There's not a whole lot of multiple choice in IB. Students need to write. And so these examinations will start for us April 29th through May 20th of 2022. And there are specific dates. I've linked the exam calendar there. I will be meeting with students actually very shortly, making sure that they know when those exams are. And students have been given this information already. The IB has indicated that we should be on route to have external examinations this year. So we'll talk about that here in just a minute too. If you go to the next slide, please. So that internal assessment and that external exam papers, those create what we refer to as IB grades or scores. Our subjects are scored on a 7-to-1 scale. So 7 being the best. And the way that we like to talk about it is that the student probably could teach the course if they got a 7 on it. We tend to consider passing right around 4s. We consider that a really good score. The core, specifically TOK and extended essay, is graded on an A to E scale. So A being the best, E being not so great. That is a scale that is there. The core CAS is graded either we met the 7 learning outcomes and the 18 months, or we did not. You'll notice on the left there that I have linked what we refer to as IB grade descriptors. So the IB has created what they refer to as IB standards for that subject. So what students should know and be able to do as a result of taking that course. Teachers have to do predicted grades for the IB. So based on these grade descriptors, based on the data they collect when they're teaching and learning and the assessment that students give back, teachers use this here. We've given this to students. We've given them access to that so they can see what the expectation is. And we're now giving it to you as well, because teachers will be communicating in the future for you and for your student what is their predicted grade in that score. Now, depending where they are in the class, so if they're still in year 1 and first quarter, we don't expect them to be at a level 7 just yet, right? And so that's a little bit where we're talking through that. How do we make sure that we give feedback to students, but understanding where they are in the course and the room that they have to grow. On the right-hand side, you will see that we need students to have a minimum of 24 points. We get those points from the subject scores. So again, we'll talk about that here in just a minute on the graphic on the next page. If you would please go to the next slide. So again, my graphic is right back here because it helps us to make sense of that all. So if students are taking 3 HL classes, they need 12 points, and 3 SL classes, they need 9 points. So again, those 4s, 5s, that's the reason we consider those to be right about passing to earn the IB diploma. If students take 4 HL classes, they still need 12 points from the scores, if you will, point scores from there. And if they're taking 2 SL classes, they take 9. You can see why we tend to recommend the 3 HL and the 3 SL. Just mathematically, it's a little bit easier to get in terms of that. Students who do well on the extended essay and TOK, there is a matrix. Again, it is linked in this presentation, and they can earn up to 3 additional points. So that is where they can gain points towards their diploma. And CAS, again, met or not met. The minimum total is 24 points. So they have to have at least 24 points in order to earn that diploma. If you go to the next slide, please. So students have access to a planning tool on how to get the IB diploma. And so this is something that they can plug in, especially if they pick those 3 subjects or the standard level subjects, and see if they can guesstimate and predict where they think they're going to fall. And this is specifically true for seniors as we've worked through what they want to count towards their IB diploma. So we add that in, CAS at least 24 points. They meet their CAS equals the IB diploma, which is very exciting. If you go to the next slide, please. And so this is something also I've presented to students so that way they can understand, but also so that you are able to understand as well. And so what the assessment looks like in each of these pieces. So for TOK, we have a TOK exhibition. That is their internal assessment. So that happens at the end of year 1 at our school for our juniors. So our seniors have already done that exhibition. They've already received a score for that. They will also write a TOK essay. So that comes in January of year 2. And those are external. So we send off the TOK essay to the IBO for them to grade and mark. That extended essay, it is external. So although they get feedback from supervisors, the supervisors are merely there to offer guidance and a sounding board as they go through, really a mentor as they're doing this process on their own. And you will see that I've given you the TOK and the EE grade descriptors. And then that is what gives the TOK that matrix of points. So you can see like if a student gets an A on the TOK and they get an A on the extended essay, they're going to get 3 additional points. I've given you also a link to what the 7 learning outcomes are there. Again, it's either met or not met that 18 months. If you go to the next slide, please. So in terms of, if we're talking about subject groups, that's that disciplinary knowledge the IB requires. So we have internal assessments. They are set and administered by the teacher, moderated by the IBO. They're turned into your teacher for feedback on specific dates. And so we keep a calendar as a school to try to make sure that we have that all in line for students. And then of course, those are those external assessments. I say exams administered in May. They're starting on the 29th of April this year, to make that just a little bit of a lie, but it does mostly happen in May. And of course, I've given you another link to those IB subject grade descriptors where you can scroll through and take a look at, what does it mean to get an A or a 7 in English Literature HL. If you go to the next slide, please. So just to dig in a little bit what this looks like. So when you look at the subject briefing guides from the IBO, this is what you will see. So every student has to take IB English Literature HL, which is why I chose that. So the internal assessment for English Lit is an individual oral. We start those in December. And so students will have an appointment time. They come and meet with me. They turn in all the work that they need to Miss Osborne, and then they will have this recorded. The IB has required and requested that all of our internal assessments are turned in this year. So students will be recorded and their voices will be sent off to the IBO. It's a requirement for us. So that individual oral, it's a 15-minute conversation with the teacher. I've given you exactly what that specifies. And then the external assessment details is over there. So paper 1 is a guided literary analysis. Paper 2 is a comparative essay. And then they've already completed their higher level essay back at the end of junior year. Again, I've given you those IB grade descriptors just so you can see a little bit where that goes, because each of these assignments, each of these requirements all have mark schemes that go into that. And so those all get feedback for students in terms of where they need to go. If you go to the next slide, please. So this all goes into IB exam registration. And so who is expected to register and how we do this. So I started the registration process with our students at the beginning of October. I went into TOK, I presented to them, stayed and answered questions if they needed that. And I also posted it on Manageback. Students have come in to my office, asked questions, made appointments, emailed. It's been really good. But if students still have questions, they still have a little bit of time, but we're wrapping this up very soon. So IB exam registration is finalized this Friday. And so I've given you a link to what I presented to students. That is that May 2022 IB exam registration presentation. Again, it lives in Manageback for students. They can easily go back and access it if they need to review it. You've actually seen parts of that. So I copied that into this presentation today, but you also can take a look at it as well if you want to take a look at that. So again, remember that the IB is an external organization and they require application for testing accommodations. So again, this is the documentation that's required from the IB, the original 504 or IEP, and a note from a medical professional. It could be what was used for the 504 IEP. Please note that there may be follow-up documentation required, but I reach out to students. So I've been working with students one-on-one with that, but just want to make sure that you are aware of that as well. All students enrolled in IB courses must complete the assessment requirements. And so it's not an option at CMS and Myers-Briggs policy that if a student is enrolled in the course, it is a requirement to take the exam. So that is just our policy. And so when students test, Typically, it's in the second year of the course. So seniors test in almost all of their courses this year. Unless for my anticipated candidates, my 11th graders, they're in a one-year class. So Business Management 1, IB Global Politics SL1, IB Philosophy SL1, and IB Psych should be IB Psych SL1. I'll change that for you. But those are all one-year courses. So if it is 11th graders an anticipated candidate taking those exams, and they have been registered already. Currently, the state of North Carolina pays for IB exams, which is wonderful. And I love that. It makes me very happy. If you go to the next slide for me, please. So again, just reiterating, all students enrolled in IB classes take exams in all of their enrolled IB classes that test during that year and complete all assessment requirements. So anticipated candidates, those were those courses I just talked about. Diploma candidates for all the courses they're enrolled in IB. If you go to the next slide, please. So what courses may an anticipated candidate or a junior take? So if they're in the second year of a language, so it's very possible that students were advanced in world language and they took the first year during their sophomore year, then they're currently enrolled in Mandarin SL2 or French, German, Latin, or Spanish SL2, and they will complete their testing assess requirements this year. If they're in any of those one-year courses that we talked about, they will also test this year. And then some students happen to be advanced in mathematics, they will test this year if they are advanced in math, and that will be good, so they know that. If you go to the next slide for me, please. So our diploma candidates or our 12th graders, they will take exams in English Literature HL. So that's their group 1. If you go to the next slide. In group 2, there's lots of current classes that they could be in. So for example, they might be in SL2 or HL2. So they might have taken the higher level version of this all the way for each of the classes or languages that we offer. It's also possible that students are going to apply that IB score from their May 21 exam session. And so this is for seniors only. So if they scored a 6 on their Latin exam, they're applying that score. So they can take 2 of the scores that they have from their junior year and apply it to their IB diploma. Go to the next slide for me, please. Again, in individuals and societies, this is a required one. Students will take IB History of the Americas, HL. Go to the next slide. And then our group 3 is where we offer a lot of our electives. So again, even seniors may be enrolled in the SL1 of those classes that we've talked about, but they can also apply a score from the May 21 exam session. So for example, if they took global politics and received a 5, they can count that and apply that towards their IB diploma if it's their 6th subject. Go to the next slide, please. In our sciences, these are all 2-year courses, so they will be enrolled in either biology, chemistry, physics, or environmental systems and societies, or sports, exercise, and health science as their science. So we'll make sure that that covers their group 4. If you go to the next slide, please. And then maths, again, they could apply if they took math analysis SL last year, or if they are currently in applications analysis SL or analysis HL. If you go to the next slide for me, please. And group 6, the arts that we offer are film, theater, and visual arts, both at the SL and the HL level. And then any of those other courses that I discussed could have been counted as your 6th subject, whether it's from group 2, 3, or even 4. If you go to the next slide, please. So sometimes students take more than the required 6 IB courses. So for example, if they took IB Psych SL1 last year and they continued on wanting to take the higher level of Psych this year, one of those will count as an additional course. So the points or the grades do not count towards their IB diploma and that IB diploma math, but they still receive a score that is reportable to colleges. We refer to those as additional IB courses. So again, we get those scores, they get a certificate, a little beautiful actually, note from the IB with their score on it, and they can still report those to colleges. We just refer to those as additional IB courses. You go to the next slide, please. So theory of knowledge, this is the core. Our students are automatically registered for theory of knowledge. Next slide, please. Again, the extended essay students are automatically registered, but students have had to pick a subject area. And so on the registration form and in Manageback, we've had students update what they are writing their paper in. And so that, as of this coming Friday, is set in stone. There is no changing that after we do that. And so why that's really important is we want students to write the actual paper that they're writing in. So one of the things they did in TOK in year one was they went through an assignment where they really dug into like what is expected for each of these papers, what's expected for a history extended essay, what's expected for a design extended essay. So they got exposed to all those different subjects, and where they will be for my juniors, they'll be able to dig in, and then they pick the topic that they want to write in. But what can sometimes happen in the research process, I intend to write a history paper and out comes a psychology paper where I've explored a topic that's much more suited to psychology. So this is part of why we wanted students to do research over the summer, why we've spent some time and put on the brakes at the beginning of this year, making sure that students knew exactly where they were and that the research was going to go where they wanted it to go. We've had a few students change their subjects as a result of that. But that is something I register for. And that's really important because when we do send off the extended essays to be marked or graded, if I've said I'm writing and registered for a history paper, and it's going to be sent to a history examiner. So if I've ended up writing a psychology paper, it's still going to be graded on the history rubrics, which is why that's really important. So I wanted to spend some time talking about that. If you go to the next slide, please. And CAS is automatically registered. Again, we've talked about the 7 learning outcomes and the 18 months. Next slide. So once students are registered, so starting next week, they will receive from me a candidate code. This will be their IB candidate code. It will be the way that we identify students. So the IB is really concerned with making sure that there's as limited bias as possibly can be in this. And so students will put their candidate codes on all of their examinations, as well as a session number. And that just identifies that they're taking it, whether they're year 1 or year 2 of the diploma program. So I will make sure they have it. It will be in Manageback. I will actually give them a physical copy of it as well. It's really important that they keep this safe because this is how they're going to also check their IB scores when they're released in July. Something that's worth noting is that students have to handwrite all of their IB examinations. There's no typing at all. And so we want to make sure that students know, and we're trying to work up the strength in our hands, especially for the past year, we've been completely remote in typing, that students will have to write for the length of the exams. And so that's really important. We want to make sure that students are able to write legibly so that examiners can understand what they're trying to say and meet those rubric requirements. If you go to the next slide, please. So I've given you a few resources. If all of a sudden this seems overwhelming, I promise you I've already reached out to students who haven't done something for me, and I'm meeting with them. So do not panic too much. I promise you that your students have been on it or I've reached out to them already. But just so that you have an ability to make sure that you understand, I've given you the how to get an IB diploma presentation. It's a presentation that walks you through the math of the IB diploma. It can seem overwhelming, so lots of deep breaths as you go through it, I promise. And then have also given you access to the IB diploma requirements graphic, where hopefully that guides you through as well of what is required. And then I've given you access to the IB diploma planning worksheet that students all have access to. It lives on our website, so you can print off as many as you want to, especially for students that have taken multiple IB diploma classes and where they can apply their scores. And there's lots of, it's a beautiful system. It's rigid, but it is beautiful in how students can sometimes apply what that is. So there's some resources there for you as you're working through that. If you go to the next slide, please. So this gets into our IB graduation regalia. So we have this policy where only students who are IB diploma candidates can be eligible to wear the IB cord at our graduation ceremony. And so to be considered an IB diploma candidate is decided May 15th of 2022. So this means that students have completed testing in all required subject areas, both internal assessments and external papers. So if a student does not turn in an internal assessment or does not show up for an exam, that unfortunately they're no longer an IB diploma candidate. And to be quite frank, that's also true about CAS. It's also true about the extended essay and any TOK requirement. So it's really important that students do that because we want them to be able to wear regalia, that they've worked really hard to do that at that point. And so lots of communication with me helps. My office door is open the majority of the time. It's not, I'm usually in a meeting, but students are welcome to come in to talk to me, etc. But deadlines are really important for us. And especially the IB gives zero grace with that. So for example, if a student misses an IB external exam, there's no makeup exams. So it's really important and imperative that students are there. So we want them to complete and submit that extended essay, meet all those TOK requirements, and complete CAS. And so to be quite honest, our students at Myers Park High School meet almost every single academic requirement to get a really high score for their classes. What tends to hold students back in terms of a diploma is they don't do CAS. And I actually should change that to they don't record CAS. And so we've had some situations where students have had these really high scores. For example, they've had 40 points towards their IB diploma and they didn't receive the diploma because they didn't record CAS, which breaks my heart. And so anything that I can do to help support students, because we know students are incredibly active. We know they're doing these things and investing in themselves. It's just a matter of recording that so that I can send that off to the IB. So again, another plea, parents, please help me. How can I help them in terms of making sure that gets recorded? So there for us. If you go to the next slide for us, please. So I would like you to say the date for my seniors. So May 23rd of 2022 at 6 p.m. in the Myers Park Auditorium, we are going to have our senior celebration. So we give out awards. That's when we're going to give out the cords. We're just really excited to be able to honor our seniors, especially hopefully in person. The last 2 years, it's been virtual or they've had to drive by and get it, but we're really excited for that. So we've already set aside a date and a time and a place already for us to be able to do that. So I'm excited to honor our kids for working as hard as they do. If you go to the next slide, please. So here's just some notes about the May 2022 IB testing session. As I mentioned previously, all expectations are that the IB is going to hold external exams. Again, last year, our students did test. So a lot of my seniors say, oh, I didn't test. And they did. It just looked really different through those internal assessments. The IB referred to that as the non-examination route, but we have every expectation that we will hold external exams this year. In those, we will make sure that COVID prevention protocols are observed. Most likely students will be required to wear masks. We'll have all that information as we come up. That will change, especially as we get to there. Lots of hand sanitizer, spacing, etc. More information with testing dates and places and times will be sent out upon the finalization of IB exam registration. So that information is shortly coming, but I want to make sure that you know that that is out there. You go to the next slide, please. So how do we access scores? So IB results are released in July for students to be able to check. So in fact, it's July 6th. So students will actually have a time where they stagger it so that we don't crash the system. I think ours last year was a 10 a.m. time slot that we could check our scores. So I will make sure that I communicate detailed information for students to be able to check scores. There's usually a presentation. For example, I've linked the year one, so seniors, I've actually linked that presentation I sent out to students both in May and in July. Again, that lives on Manageback, that students can go back and take a look at that. So if students need to go back and they want to check their scores from last year, they can do that. And there's the directions in there for how to do that. If you go to the next slide, please. So let's just talk briefly about student life and our expectations and how do we support these students who are going through this really rigorous program of international standards. If you go to the next slide. So you've heard me mention Manageback. You probably know what Manageback is. This is just a new plug that Manageback is really important for students to check. I send out any time I get an information that if there's a service opportunity that students may want to take advantage of, whether it's a campus cleanup or working with the Charlotte Youth Council or Sedgefield reached out to us this past week. Anytime I get any sort of information like that, I post that there for students. But in addition, I also send the registration information there. I talk to students that way. We manage CAS, extended essays managed there. Their coursework, their IAs are going to be uploaded to Manageback. It is just a really important place for students to be comfortable with. There are apps there. I am always willing to help students. Sometimes students know more than I do. So just please make sure that students are checking that, if not daily, especially if you're a senior, but definitely weekly, making sure that keeping that all up to date. It's a really important place to go. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is just a few of the Manageback features, just so that you're aware. There are classes. So as we create classes, they're going to be able to upload their internal assessments there. There's handbooks there. So if students don't know how to upload something, there's CAS information that's there. The extended essays where we do that, they will be uploading and managing their TOK essay through Manageback. That messages tab is so important because that's where I communicate directly with students. The calendar, so I keep the master calendar. So I post any internal assessment dates that I'm aware of as teachers communicate to me. That's where I'm going to post the CAS deadlines, etc. And then there's a files place where they're going to be able to take a look at any files that any teacher or myself have uploaded for students. So really important. There's an app for both Android and for Apple as well. If you go to the next slide, please. So just to help you and your brain, like there's just lots to manage in this digital world. So Manageback is where we manage everything for IB, literally manage. It is actually created by 2 former IB students, and it's just really taken off. Schools around the world that offer IB use Manageback. It's just a really great place. Canvas is where your teacher is going to work with course-specific work. Every teacher is able to kind of design that a little bit differently, make it their own. And then we have PowerSchool, and that is where, I bet you know, that's where you get all the information about grades and attendance and all of that. So those are like how you can keep those 3 things separate. My main focus is actually through Manageback. If you go to the next slide, please. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about how do we support students? What does that look like? And how can students take advantage of that if they haven't already? Next slide. So me, I am the #1 resource for students, not to be a little bit arrogant about that, but I usually can troubleshoot questions. I get to the school building most days by 6:30. Students can drop in right before class. I have moved my office to the LA 228. So I call it the IB Connected office because we want students to be connected. There's lots there. If they need a mask, if something happens to theirs, or if they need hand sanitizer, or sometimes a light snack. Again, life happens, right? And so I am there for students to come and talk to. I keep the master calendar in there. I have office hours. Sometimes it's nice when students just stop by informally if they have a lunch break. It's just really a nice place to see and connect with students. I'm actually off campus tomorrow now that I say that, but at an IB coordinators meeting, but for the most part, I am usually there. And so they can ask any questions regarding the program, or I can help them troubleshoot and figure out managing life sometimes, especially in the IB world, can be a little bit difficult. Next slide, please. We also have our wonderful IB Parent Advisory Council, which is just absolutely amazing. And they do so much for us. It's a parent, it is a group of parent volunteers who help us both the MYP and the DP level, raising funds to support our IB program. So we are supported by the district, but we sometimes don't get everything we need from the district that IB requires. And specifically, that's going to actually refer to teacher and classroom support, also training. So the IB requires that every teacher in the IB program be trained. We will be training a new principal coming up here. So there's just lots of stuff that's coming up. And we want to really be the best IB programs that we possibly can be in the state of North Carolina. We were one of the first diploma programs, and we were the first middle years program in the entire state of North Carolina. So that comes with a lot of legacy and a lot of pride. And I am really happy to carry that forward. So for our 2021-2022 fundraising sources, we are asking for family donations, corporate matching, and then linking Harris Teeter Publix and Amazon awards. If you go to the next slide, please. So have given you some easy links there. We sent out an IB Express last week with a far more beautifully worded request from the parent board. So if you haven't gotten that, please let me know. I'll make sure that you get access to that. But then have given you how you could donate to support our programs, which would just be lovely. And we thank you in advance just for considering that. And I appreciate you for considering that. It's lovely. If you go to the next slide, please. We also have a writing center. So this is from the whole school, and Ms. Lee supports this. So we actually have students who both work at the writing center, but it is also there to support students who are writing their extended essay or need anything. And so there's a link there where they can get connected. And that's a place that just is really there to serve students. You know, how do I write? What do I need help with? You know, who do I talk to? And so we just really want to make sure that students know that that is there, and we want students to make use of that. If you go to the next slide, please. We also have a wonderful staff at Myers Park High School, teachers, counselors, administration. And the one thing that I would just ask in the same way for me is just to communicate. So sometimes teachers can't help if they don't know what's going on, and just really reiterate, if I can help facilitate that, let me know. And I'm more than happy to make sure that that happens. But we do really have an amazing staff at Myers Park High School. If you go to the next slide, please. And of course, we have a handbook. So I mentioned this earlier. Here's another link for it. It has expectations, how to specifically record and manage back, the steps they need to go through, what that is there. So please make sure that students use that. And it's there for in times when I can't necessarily answer an email right away, but they need to know that. And that is what that's there for. So for students to utilize. If you go to the next slide, please. And so how do you stay connected? Next slide. So again, listed this all here. I'm a list person. Sometimes I need it all on one page. And so myersparkib.org is where I try to update that to make sure that it's current. It has accurate information for what's going forward. This presentation and the recording of it will be posted there as well. I'll probably take down the recording probably in about a month's time, just because nobody needs to hear my voice longer than that, but it'll be there in case you need to access that. I will keep the presentation active there. Another link to our CAS handbook. For our 12th grade, we actually have an orientation and there's a whole page dedicated to everything they need. So I've got a big picture, the 4-year coursework plan, orientation materials, etc. And the same for 11th grade. There's just a ton of information there that students can dig through at their leisure, or you as well. If you're not receiving our IB Express, then we do not send them out regularly. They're sent out as needed, just to make sure in the chaos of the digital world that when you see something come from us, you know it's really important. And so there's a place where you can sign up for the IB Express. And if you go to the next slide, please. So again, to meet our students' needs and the requests that they gave us, we are really responsive. I am responsive, I hope, to student requests, especially when they're looking at self-management and how we can structure that to make sure that they are in that position to learn how to learn. And so I have a checklist here for 11th graders, right? Just this is what is expected specifically of SA and how to keep connected. And on the next slide, we have done the same for our 12th graders. Again, that May 15th deadline is essential for my 12th grade, because after that, I can't put in any CAS for our students. So that would mean that they are no longer an IB diploma candidate. And so please, please, please make sure that we've gotten everything there and students have communicated with me if something's going on, right? So we wanna make sure that that's all there and set to go. Next slide, please. So thank you so much. Very much appreciate you. And we are looking forward to this fabulous year, and we already are in second quarter. So I look forward to seeing you. Hope I get to meet you very soon and working with our students. So again, if you have any questions or if this was incredibly overwhelming, want to debrief a little bit, just send me an email and we can correspond that way and go through there. Thanks, everyone.